Hi everybody, I'm Rob Lindsay, Head of Programmes for The Space, and welcome to day 3 of our Digital Culture Talks conference. We're delighted to be hosted by the University of Wolverhampton's Screen School. It's an absolutely incredible facility and a real privilege to be here. And if you'd like to know more about the Screen School, please do check out the link that we'll put into the chat now. Over the past few days, we've been discussing and exploring the ways to encourage and strengthen the cultural sector all across the country, and we've done so by putting a spotlight on the incredible achievements occurring here in the West Midlands and the creative forces behind all of them. Today, we're going to be stepping back for a little bit of horizon scanning, exploring a sector in transition, celebrating our big achievements, but also asking what comes next. We've got some absolutely fantastic speakers for you here today, but before we go any further, before we jump in, just a little bit of online housekeeping from our conference producer, Jamie. Over to you, Jamie.
Good morning, everyone. Jamie here, producer of the Digital Culture Talks. For a visual description, I am a brown-haired white male with designer stubble in his very late 20s, but hopefully you won't see me again because that means absolutely nothing has gone wrong. A little housekeeping. You will see on your screen a chat and a Q&A section for you to engage with our event. The chat is event-wide, whereas the Q&A feature will post questions specifically related to the session you are in, so feel free to use either. We are joined today by Deborah and Harry, our fantastic BSL interpreters for today. We also have closed captioning provided by the brilliant Jen in the link that we've posted, and audio description provided by the wonderful Alice. For the audio description, you can open the Zoom link provided and run this simultaneously alongside Hopin, which is our events platform for today. We are going to be taking a 10-minute break around 12 o'clock, returning at around 10 past 12, and we should be finished by around 1 p.m. Myself and the team will be sitting backstage managing the admin, so if you have any problems or questions, please drop us a message in the chat function. Thanks all, and back over to you, Rob.
This is like we now cut. Thank you very much, Jamie. Let's now kick off. In our first session today, the Space Associate Harmeet Chagger-Khan is talking us through how her recent Birmingham Trams project explored new, emerging forms of storytelling. Harmeet leads on innovation immersive projects for the space, looking at how digital innovation increases access and reaches new audiences. Harmeet is also the founder of Surfing Lightbeams, a media studio creating immersive experiences and playable adventures with communities at the heart of them. Over to you, Harmeet.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Harmeet Chagger-Khan. I'm a British Indian female with long curly brown hair with a lot of blonde highlights, and I'm wearing a black jumper. As Rob said, I'm creative director of Surfing Lightbeams, and we create immersive experiences and playable adventures, applying research with new technology across stories and games, placing communities and people at the heart of the process to create positive behaviour change. In the summer of 2021, Surfing Lightbeams, along with Crossover Labs, who are also immersive media specialists, were originally commissioned by Birmingham 2022, the cultural festival for the Commonwealth Games, to create Time Travel Tram, an immersive experience that would turn the front carriage of a real tram into a giant VR headset by using specially modified transparent screens that synced the real world using GPS. Created in Unreal Engine by a team of developers, animators, and coders, it used the same process that is used to create virtual reality and games. And it brought living history into the 21st century by transporting passengers back in time on board the West Midlands Metro network. We used cutting-edge technology to turn archival footage into 3D worlds, and our developers created a complex system build to map a virtual tram onto the path of a real tram using GPS to trigger time portals, allowing audiences to see glimpses of the past. We developed processes to spatialize archive footage and photographs, and then combined them with scanned objects and 3D elements to create a series of fantastical collage worlds. And I remember when Crossover and I were coming up with ideas for the pitch for the Commonwealth Games, and we knew that we had to work with West Midlands Metro, and we knew that we wanted to create an immersive experience, and we knew that we had to reach a huge audience, a huge number of audience members. And so there was just one problem, that actually creating immersive experiences generally requires a headset, and you just can't get the volume of people through that you need to. And also, VR headsets are still notoriously clunky. So we thought, why don't we just create a shared immersive experience without the headset? Plus, we wanted to engage with stories from the past, and we thought, how can we get audiences and people excited about history? Of course, we'll create a time-traveling tram. One of the unique advantages of being a micro studio, like we both are, is that you can work in a very agile way. And so we were able to galvanize partners and teams of artists, technologists, fabricators, and developers to collaborate with us on a shared vision. I think one of the things that really appealed to all of our partners was not just that we were making an immersive experience, as exciting as that was, but that actually it was a way of getting people to uncover the different layers of detail, to gather stories, to engage with communities, and to collaborate with a number of artists in order to create authentic stories that had meaning and relevance. So we worked closely with 4 archive partners who were Black Country Living Museum, the Media Archive for Central England, British Film Institute, and Sandwell Archives, to source archival footage showing what it was like to work, live and play in the West Midlands, and how its rich industrial heritage and the migration of people created a lasting imprint and cultural legacy. And there were 5 engagement partners who came on board, and they were Birmingham Music Archive, Creative Black Country, Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, Beat Freaks, and Flatpack Projects. Together, we co-commissioned 6 incredible sound artists who were spoken word artist Auden Allen, who worked with young Black and Asian poets with Beat Freaks and LGBTQ+ communities, award-winning music producer Simon Dougal, who ran pop-up workshops at Flatpack screenings and collected stories from South Asian women, Birmingham's very own poet laureate Jasmine Gardosi, who had conversations with regulars on the Desi pub scene and spoke to shopkeepers down Soho Road, courtesy of an ingenious partnership with Creative Black Country. They're here in the room. We absolutely love you. Then there was sound artist and composer Bobby Jane Gardner, and she had conversations and collected stories with students in schools in Birmingham and the Black Country. And then we had sound artists Richard Shrewsbury and Jeremy Clay, who collected oral histories from octogenarians and former employees from the aluminium and glass industries. So these artists were the keystones, really, bringing together the relationship between community engagement, memories, and history to create the soundtracks that underscored the visual experience. And this resulted in 5 chapters of the entire experience, which were Industry, Blowing Off Steam, The High Street, Spirit of Youth, and Chains. And you'll get to see a little bit of that later. So here's the process. So we did the initial archive research that catalyzed the community engagement and the story collection through workshops. These stories were then used to create our visual narratives, as well as being used by the sound artists to create the soundtracks for the experience. We then took the 5 soundtracks and created the backbone of the visual spatial experience at the National Theatre's immersive storytelling studio. And then our dev team went through a series of 5 sprint cycles in order to create each chapter. This is where we get to show you some gorgeous visuals. So the 5 stories were Spirit of Youth, which was all about playtime, music, culture, and fashion of the kids of the past, uncovered by the youth of the present. There was Blowing Off Steam, and this is a screen grab from the stereoscopic view just before it gets injected into YouTube 360. Blowing Off Steam was all about exploring the weird and wonderful pastimes like knobbly knees competitions. There was Industry, where you could travel 300 million years in 3 minutes through forests, fires, and factories. The High Street saw how the influences of migration changed the High Street in a celebration of food, colour, and community. And then there was Chains, which is about a proud tradition of fighting for freedom and how protest is at the cornerstone of creating change. But what chains are there left to break? And what chains are there left to make? Just going to show you a short video. And don't worry, you don't have to put a headset on. It's a flatty.
How many more chains will we make? How many more chains are there left to break? There is genuine difference. Nothing stays the same. How can we break the constant change that exists within our collective DNA? Red girls with forged fires, screaming cries of steam change, earth pulsates with veins, sparks fly swishing says we'll lose chains. Built for enslavement, constraint and restraint, where women work for less than minimum wage. What hides in darkness comes out in light. Protest and national strikes. We must all fight for what is right because survival is our birthright. So where do we draw the line? What will we leave behind for our future generations? Birmingham, home to the largest UK youth population, an ethnic diverse fusion of nations. A place where immigration brought tension, deprivation led to frustration, prejudice, police harassment and misrepresentation at the hands of media sensationalization. Stereotypes of inner city melanin colours, portrayed as muggers, criminals and drug pushers. Youth looting and stealing, but nobody's asking why. We ain't being fed the right foods to nourish our souls and feed our minds. The Birmingham hammer strikes. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The forged fires ignite again. Blood pulsates through veins. Sparks fly as people come together to break those chains. Has anything changed? Pride, shame, sexuality, genders changed, scrutinized for difference, scapegoated and left to blame, struggling with accepting myself because the world around me won't. My identity screams for freedom, no action taken. Why would I dare? The views of this environment leave me scared. A flag of colours flies high and proud. Music plays loud. A world exists where people feel free to come out now. But how? What was the cost? How many hidden shame? How many lives were lost? A label is for identification, not isolation or separation. Freedom is individual, liberation is collective. A liberated future is a world with gardens, no fences, where we're not grouped, stereotyped and misrepresented. How do we give and receive information? Extract freedom from oppression? How do we achieve freedom from ourselves? Through freedom of expression. Oppression is here to teach us that our chains are our teachers. There's enough space for our differences, uniqueness and features. How do we speak, listen and go a little deeper than the surface? If we don't share and care, will the furnace resurface? Chains are meant to be broken. Riots, wars and protests force the hand of oppression so that we can redirect our divine collective purpose. Judgment can create more chains and sever the links. So stop and think. With chains we can all be enslaved or all be in sync. We are the chains refined and shaped by the fire. So, will you make the choice to enslave or inspire?
So why archive like you would need any more justification? By using archive of regular people from the past 100 years or so, audiences young and old from all kinds of backgrounds were able to find themselves within the archive footage, bringing the past into the present and raising questions like, what would I be doing if I lived back then? Have we progressed as a society, or is it still something that we are working towards? It's recognizing that the struggles for progression and equality that existed in the past are still here today. The lens on who it affects might have shifted slightly, but making our voices heard and collective action are crucial to creating change. And so is the realization that all of us have a vital role to play in society. We may not realize we are making history simply by going to work or being a part of the community, but we are all doing so in our own unique way. So some audience figures and insights. Amongst all of the challenges on the project, and there were many of those, and we can talk about those later at the bar, we reached 176,000 people in the summer of 2022 through a multi-tiered distribution format. So you could experience Time Travel Tram on your mobile phone on the tram network, at a VR pop-up, or at home through YouTube 360. There were 5 original soundtracks created, a total of 12 artists commissioned, and 86 participants engaged in the workshop process. Our most popular story was Chains, the one about protest, and that was mainly watched by an audience who were Tories. So maybe we did change hearts and minds. Our second biggest audience group were activists, closely followed by music lovers. And being able to gain those kinds of insights about our audiences has been super useful in thinking about what we create next. So what is the future, both for us as micro studios and immersive companies creating work, but also for immersive? Well, one thing is that we want to continue to collaborate together, which I think is a testimony to being able to lean into each other's strengths as companies and directors. It's also being able to be equitable about the decisions we make through the highs and the lows, and understanding that true collaboration means that you work towards a shared vision, but you allow for those things to change with the many visions and ideas that come from the artists and the people that you engage with. So we want to continue to create immersive experiences for audiences that have their roots firmly planted in the history, diversity, and stories of the past and present. We also want to combine socially engaged practice with archive to create compelling stories. And we want to create experiences that democratize art and bring them to the people. What we also discovered during Time Travel Tram was that the story at the heart of the UK archive is one of a changing nation and a celebration of multiculturalism. Audiences want to experience culture in different ways, and they want to hear stories that connect them to one another and that give them hope and positivity for the future. This kind of work, which is innovative, which is creatively ambitious, which has many, many moving parts, and that celebrates many voices, that repositions culture, that reflects the stories of people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, who don't have the same lived experience as you. These stories, they allow all of us to find connections to universal truths, that as human beings, no matter how different we all are, we all strive for similar things: a desire to belong, to be loved, to have enough, to be enough, and to contribute to something greater than ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Harmeet. Thanks very much, Harmeet. We now have time for some questions with the Space's Chief Exec, Fiona Morris.
Thanks, Rob. And thanks to Harmeet. It was a beautiful project. You know, I think everything that you said you wanted to achieve with it, I think you can see from the images that it obviously kind of did that. And it looks very calm. It looks, I'm looking at a beautiful swan on the surface of the lake, but I know that underneath there, those feet were paddling away like crazy. You described yourself as being somebody with a, you know, kind of running a micro studio. For people who may not know what that means, that basically means you're doing everything. No one's paying you unless you've managed to get the money to do it. So how do you approach a project like this? I mean, you're a creative artist. You've come up with a beautiful diamond of an idea. But in order to make that happen, you end up with a kind of an end title card there with about 7 or 8 different partners, and I know there were huge amounts more. So how do you go about that, and what sort of advice would you give to other people starting out on this road?
Sure. I think you have to have the audacity to believe in your ideas and your stories. you know, and when you do, you know, when you find that there's something and you have to tell this thing, or you want to create this with other people, you find the collaborators who will join you on that journey, no matter how difficult it is. And we found that on Time Travel Tram. You know, we had this crazy idea. It had never been done before. It was technically very, very challenging and ambitious. Our dev team were constantly problem solving and sending us out to do live testing, you know, on the trams to make sure that things would trigger at the right places. But actually it was filled with this kind of great energy of like, this is slightly crazy and it's also going to tell some great stories. And I think that's what people are really interested in. People as in audiences, because they want to find those stories that kind of give them the opportunity to connect. They're like a North Star, you know, it resets your moral compass, kind of thinking that actually there's something here and it reflects many, many voices. But also it then allows us as micro studios to knock on doors and be really bold. And I think you have to do that. I think most artists are really opportunistic and bold. And I think that's what we have. It's our superpower. We have our currency is our ideas and our art. And actually without us, the beat of the drum would be silent.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily value those ideas perhaps as a society as much as we might like. But presumably you also found yourself having to do lots of things that you didn't expect to, because I'm very aware that's a very public piece of art. You talk about people finding experiences, but this was going to be something that was going to be somebody going to work and suddenly finding themselves in an environment they didn't expect to be in. Now, I know from kind of lots of live art, public artworks, it's complicated when you start to say, I want to occupy a space somewhere where art and culture doesn't normally find itself. What were your processes? What was the weirdest thing you ended up finding yourself having to do to persuade somebody to let you do something?
It was always with the technical challenges. It wasn't ever with the community engagement. I think everybody knows the value of community engagement. I've, you know, been working in that way for the last 15 years. So it was always with the technical challenges. So, for example, when we were mapping the virtual tram onto the real tram, we were trying to get data from on board the trams. It wasn't the right data. They didn't have the right APIs. So we had to basically create our own GPS system that we could install, but then we had to test it ourselves, which meant me with a backpack and a laptop on a train, paying for a ticket and then going, I'm just sitting up. I'm just like, why are you still on the tram? You know, why are you still here after 3 hours, collecting data and then sending it back to the dev team? So it's those kinds of things. And then actually realizing that if you find the right collaborators, you can do anything. And it's a really high energy environment that fills you with a huge amount of excitement, you know, because actually you could say it can't be done. It's really insane. There are too many variables. You know, you're not just trying to create a great story in a visual spatial environment. And probably quite a few of us have sat in quite a lot of bad VR experiences where we're sitting on a chair spinning around going, this would be so much better as a normal film. So it's not even that. It's actually about going, how do we do this? And how do we work out, how do we create the systems? And you find developers who will do that. And they're just problem solving. Nothing is a no. Everything is that we'll find another way. And I think that can encourage you to kind of keep thinking bigger. So there was a lot of that. There was.
And obviously, I mean, one of the things that I think you mentioned in your talk there, you immediately overcame the issue of a headset being quite self-limiting, one headset, one person. Actually, if a whole tram becomes a headset, then lots more people can have a shared experience. And that does feel like that is one of the barriers for a lot of immersive technologies right now. So what made you think about that? Where had you come from previously to go, how do I take an immersive experience and make it more democratic?
I've always been really fascinated with, you know, experiences that use new technology, but I've always been really interested in how they help us layer onto the world so that actually we're really present, but it allows us to think differently about the things around us. So I really came from a background in AR. Having done a couple of projects with some charities, working with young people, you know, who are vulnerable, creating games in public spaces, looking at how you can kind of create that sense of shared play, you know, if you play together, you'll stay together, that kind of thing. And actually what that means in terms of increasing your sense of resilience and well-being. So that's really my bag of tricks. I'm really interested in that field of neuroscience and gaming, and, you know, kind of making you feel better, and how you can like increase your dopamine levels by playing together, you know, and gaining rewards. So I came from that world, very much here, but I love everything to do with VR and technology, and anything new, I'll be there testing it out, seeing how I can break it. So actually, when we did this project, we were like, can we do this? Is this even possible? And I think we can. It's always the thing, isn't it? We always want to think, how's the way we can remove the technology to make your work more accessible? And I think that's also the thing that we now need to start changing our behavior on, that you don't just make the one piece and you send it off to a shiny festival and you get lots of awards for it and a pat on the back, nice as that is. Actually, who is really seeing your work? Are you creating work for a mass audience? Are you creating work for an echo chamber of familiars who you see again and again and again? And there's nothing wrong with either of those, but actually having a multi-tiered distribution format means that you are going to reach audiences who would never ever see your work. But then you have to think about how you do the marketing and the distribution for that. So you have to always put that in place and not forget it's just about the shiny thing with a live audience. It's also about how do you get that with people who probably will never leave the house or don't have time to go and see the big spectacle.
Absolutely. And also my feeling within the cultural sector is sometimes we can be very overawed by the technology. And we commissioned an article from one of our other associates, Catherine Allen, recently, and she made the really interesting point in the article that you know, we often find ourselves in a situation where we're talking about what new technology can I apply to my art form, when in actual fact what we need to do is look to history and go, no, flip it the other way around. What can artists do to help the adoption of new technologies? Because actually what we forget is that audiences can be quite resistant to change. And certainly with something like VR, you know, putting that headset on can be very, very limiting to the numbers of people who feel confident about it. And that can be, you know, kind of reasons of geography and physical accessibility, but also just that it's a strange thing to do to yourself, to kind of blind yourself to the real world. So what I thought was really amazing about this project is that it actually was about inspiring audiences, because we need them. Otherwise, none of these technologies succeed. So what do you think you'd like to do next? Or is that it? You never want to go near a tram again?
Probably won't go near a tram again, to be honest with you. But yeah, absolutely. Definitely still thinking about making immersive experiences, collaborating. I love having lots of people around the table. I think it's the way that you make sure you don't get pigeonholed into your own ideas. And so they then evolve, and they often evolve for the better. So I think, yeah, working in a kind of multi-partnered with lots of collaborators, lots of artists. I remember when we commissioned our sound artist and they saw our Miro board, which was just really like our brain on a page. And they were like, this is like, there's a lot of stuff here. And we were like, just take the bits that resonate with you and then make it your own. And actually that's exactly what happened. So we had ideas, they got changed by the sound artist ideas. They then got changed again by the time we got to our dev team making our visual experience. So nothing ever turned out how we intended it to. And that's a really great way. That's how we know we're collaborating well. And I think also it's about me staying in that space of looking at, you know, all of these new technologies, you know, they're up for changing. You know, we don't know the rules of the genre.
I think Robin said yesterday, didn't she, about, you know, the important space to have is the one where you break it.
Yeah.
You know, and I can remember with a lot of HD when it first came along, or, you know, kind of a 3D, you know, actually the manufacturers for the cameras were saying, this is how it must be used. You have to have, you know, somebody who will absolutely tell you what the optical visual range should be for the camera lenses. And then you get directors who come in and go, But I like it going fuzzy around the edges, and technically you've broken it. As far as the engineers are concerned, you've done the wrong thing, but in fact you've actually pushed it on somewhere new, somewhere exciting. So difficult question, but 10 years time, what do you think? What will be the thing that we will be using? What will be, because immersive's been the buzzword now for about the last 5 years. What's it going to be? Come on, do your future crystal ball gazing.
Crystal ball. Am I going to say? I think it's going to be AI. I think it is. I think we're going to see more personalized and customizable experiences. I think that whole thing that Punch Drunk started a very long time ago, the kind of godfathers of immersive theatre, which, you go to a Punch Drunk show and it's for thousands of people, but actually they make their shows for an audience of one. So I think like the more experiences that we have, which feel like they are just for you, and we see lots of people already doing that, that bit where you find not just that sticky moment in the story or the experience, but actually where you feel like it's just been made for you. So I think AI will lean itself into that. I think perhaps it might make us think more cleverly about the world around us. I mean, that's what we hope, right? When we use technology, isn't just that it's another gadget, it's another vehicle. It's not the end game. I think what it does is it helps us to behave differently. That's that's the kind of like alma mater for me. It's like, actually, if we can feel embodied as a different person, if we can get a sense of other people, if we can learn to understand our own behaviors and biases, then actually we can have more compassion in the world. And I think technology will help us in that way. Yeah. But obviously we've got to make sure we develop all of the frameworks and the ethics to safeguard, because those things have to be in place. Otherwise Absolutely. We won't be able to use it properly.
So have you signed up for Threads?
I have signed up for Threads, yes. I use Midjourney to create all of my pitch decks. So yeah, it's already happening.
Very good. Thank you very much, Harmeet. It was really fascinating. Handing back to Rob.
Thanks so much, Fiona, and thanks again to Harmeet. We're going to stick with this topic of looking to the future as I introduce our next speaker, Ian Ravenscroft. Ian is creative director of Hey Green Raven, producing immersive digital projects all across the cultural sector. In addition to this, Ian is also a writer and consultant who has produced work for people including digital agencies, animation studios, and of course the BBC. We've asked Ian to join us here today with a provocation about how the creative sector might better work together in order to take advantage of the opportunities that might arise in the future. Over to you, Ian.
So nice to see you, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the space for having me here today. I'm Ian Ravenscroft. I'm creative director of Hey Green Raven. So I'm a producer and consultant, and I support arts organisations and production studios to embrace the possibilities of emerging media. And it's so nice to hear Harmeet speaking. Very, very familiar. The whole process of being an independent producer, someone who has their own studio but works with multiple partners, and it's all about collaboration. It's about using technology to inspire people, to connect with people. And while my job is generally to blend creativity and technology, I believe the human aspect of working within digital is still the most important factor for success. So I'm going to hopefully touch on some of those topics today. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk about my view of the future of media in the cultural sector. So quite a big topic. I'm not going to talk about too many specific projects. I'm going to talk about a general approach to how we can do digital, how we can use immersive media, and how we can take advantage of some of the opportunities. The future of this media isn't very clear currently. It's a future that we have an opportunity to shape. It's a future that I hope will be a future that together, something we can collaborate on and make happen. So we know that the UK's arts and culture sector has always been brilliant at making connections. It connects people with experiences, connects artists to audiences. It draws connecting lines between ideas, time, places, and perspectives. Those connections are often rooted in geography, in communities, in art forms, and in venues. And the aim for many arts organisations is to extend those connections to their digital work, to use existing networks to boost their messages, share experiences, and enrich more lives. But we're experiencing significant barriers to connecting with those audiences. So while the opportunities for digital connection are huge and the tools to do new things are emerging all the time, I believe it's time to rethink our approach. So we're entering an era where constant change is everywhere. I mean, developments in technology are outpacing the sector's ability to react and create. We can be left with our head spinning, playing catch up while other sectors reap the rewards. So the reality is that audiences have many ways to connect with high quality digital experiences. I mean, often the access point for those audiences is in their pocket. Their mobile phone has so many options to engage them. Their behaviors are already established in those digital mediums, but we're always looking at the new and what's coming next, and it can leave us chasing shadows. So, I mean, technologies such as browser-based or augmented reality, increasingly accessible motion capture processes, AI, artificial intelligence-driven formats, they offer opportunities to connect with audience in brand new ways. The technology is there, but not necessarily the scale, the stability, or the control over those platforms. So one factor that I'm noticing more and more is the commercialization of some of those digital spaces. So that can be a limiting factor for creativity, where the emergence of social media, over the last 20 years, promised that we could have a platform for open creativity. We could reach people in new ways. The barriers were being broken down. But now we find ourselves in service to algorithms more and more. We have to design our content to fit the needs of commercial partners. And often we have to pay to play to actually achieve worthwhile reach. We're also seeing more unreliability and turbulence in the digital and social platforms that we use. So, and consolidation of companies into significant monopolies. So we're finding that the problems that these cause is that we are dancing to the tune of platforms and technology that we have not got a say in, and we don't get the chance to design experiences that are purely for audiences. So awareness, accessibility, scalability, and sustainability are the keys to making these lasting connections. And to achieve this, I think we need to look beyond the case studies, beyond the experiments, beyond the short-term funding wins, to something bigger and more longer lasting. And part of the problem is competition. So there's more competition for our digital attention from outside the arts, but too often the sector is in competition with itself. Arts, culture and heritage organisations have to fight for funding. They have to fight for footfall, for attention, for exposure. And yet the current trend in digital growth really is partnerships. We're seeing brands and commercial organisations partner with each other, with platforms, joining forces, merging to combine new digital opportunities. Reimagine themselves and enter new markets. While there are always exceptions, this is not always the established way in the cultural sector. We can be guilty of working within our own bubbles, protecting our own patch of the arts landscape. I'd like to see a rethink of the current models of digital creativity. We can think about funding in different ways. We can cooperate in new ways to achieve scale that at the moment, as individual arts organizations, we find difficult to do. It's difficult to establish ourselves with, say, a bespoke project using a technology and to achieve the audiences that the investment in those technologies requires. So I think that in joining forces, we could be a stronger sector overall. So the key to that is collaboration. And while each individual organization is a specialist in their own audience, in their art form, we live in a world which digital connection is fragmented. People have curated their own digital worlds. They use the handful of apps that they like. They talk to people that they've chosen to. We exist in ever decreasing digital circles. Personally, I think that the future of media and the arts was characterized by strengthening numbers. I'd really like to see arts organizations pull together and create new collaborations, to create bigger networks, to pool resources, to use more cross-sector thinking, and to generally have a bigger say in how we operate on technology platforms, how we reach audiences, and how we can achieve sustainable growth in these new digital frontiers. And one of the benefits of this, I hope, will be more control. So currently on platforms such as Twitter, on TikTok or Meta, or emerging giants such as Epic Games, they have the final say on how you can create or connect with people. they are the new gatekeepers to the established audiences. We have to work with their systems, with their processes. We have to pay them for access to certain features. We don't get a lot of say in the roadmap of where these platforms are. But at the moment, we seem to be rushing to these spaces to wave for attention, to catch the eye of new audiences. And yet, time and again, the rug is pulled from beneath our feet. We lose access, our legacy work breaks, our formats become obsolete. Essentially, we're feeding the machine, but continuing to chase shadows. And I think that it's time to change that and change the way of thinking. So by coming together at scale and collaborating to find solutions for audiences, I believe the sector can create a digital version of our world-class network of venues, a public arts infrastructure for digital and future media. So I suppose what I'm hoping for is that we can take a step back from the short-term gains of technology, take a step back from looking at what is new and what the new service is, and think as a sector, what will serve audiences? How can we create something that has a sustainable future, that we have control over the features of, and actually can be agile and move through time and not be at the expense of the audience by paying a corporation to hope that we get the right features and hope that we retain access and hope that we retain some semblance of control. So this might look like clusters of organizations. So I don't advocate for the fact that the sector is one organism. It's a connected web of communities. So I would like to see organizations come together to create spaces optimized for their content. It might be the UK's dance organizations, innovating in motion capture, providing remote experiences that can reach anyone in the world. It might be a national network of museums with standards in 3D scan collections that can be viewed, contextualized or remixed. It might be sector-wide digital infrastructure that gives arts, culture and heritage the confidence to create and the momentum to build without splitting capacity further and between platforms they have no say in. So it might also reignite the commercial possibilities and partnerships that would take future media content to the next level. And all of this is to say that culture in the UK needs the space to do what they do best, which is to create and showcase great creativity. The impetus and opportunity to create new digital work in future-facing formats that take advantage of the advances in technology and digital behaviours that we see. So I'd like to see new combinations of organisations joining forces to open up the possibilities of unexpected crossovers, shared audiences, global scale, and hybrid approach to physical and digital presentation. And in the process, I hope that can help us consider the experiences of everyone. With more control, we gain the ability to make digital content and platforms that are accessible, diverse, optimized for the broadest range of needs, rather than working within limitations set by others. The priority for accessibility has been quite poor on the technology providers front. We are often innovating in spaces that we're trying to hack it together, trying to make it work. The accessibility features are not built into a lot of the platforms we distribute our work on. With some control and some new thinking on a wider scale, I think we can set the standards higher and we can reach more people in a more effective way. So while every new advance in technology provides opportunities for the cultural sector to connect with people, but with each development, the landscape becomes harder to navigate. I really hope that the future is for arts and culture is to design its own digital landscape, to begin to collaborate, to combine, to cluster, begins to take control of its own destiny. So let's start talking about how we can build something together. Let's build something sustainable. Let's think beyond the obvious to build scale and capacity. And let's start to lead the conversation. And if we can set high standards and serve audiences with incredible experiences, we can move forward in a really confident way, a way that at the moment we are following the lead of others. And I strongly feel that the arts can lead the way. The arts together has a powerful voice, fantastic offer for audiences. I believe a new collaborative approach to emerging technology can take full advantage of those opportunities. I really think that the audience desire is there. I think that the technology is there, but we are expecting someone to serve us the ideal platform and way to reach people. I think it's time that we actually had a look at how we could do that ourselves and start those conversations. So a big topic, but I hope it's one that can start some conversations, and I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Ian. We'll have a chance to hear more from Ian in a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who's here to talk about the challenges of working across both stage and screen, the creative director of the Belgrade, Campbell. Corey has used a collaborative devising process in order to bring real people's stories to the stage, focusing particularly on the African and Caribbean communities. His flagship production for the Belgrade as co-artistic director has been Seaview, a fantastic new digital television series which has been created, produced and filmed here in the West Midlands, using a fantastic writer's room approach to really nurture emerging talent in the area. Over to you, Corey.
Hi, my name is Corey Campbell. I'm the creative director of the Belgrade Theatre. I do want to apologise firstly because I think I didn't understand the setup of today actually. And now that I understood it properly, which is more than likely matter, I would have definitely done slides. So apologies, you're going to be hearing dulcet tones for 2 minutes. And I'm going to ramble on about what we're trying to achieve and will eventually. So a bit about the Belgrade. We are a co-creating theatre. Co-creating is a word that's being thrown around a lot at the moment. It's got a rich history of co-creation, but for us, what co-creation really is about is almost a codependent relationship, both with artists and community. What that looks like is we don't believe that we have all the answers. We certainly don't. We believe a lot of the onus for our creativity comes from our community and our artists. So the codependent relationship is understanding what we have to give and also allowing both our audiences, our communities and our artists to hold as experts, both strategically, operationally and creatively, to feed back to us and let us understand exactly where we need to be as an organization. That model we're currently forming is heutagogical, which we hold as artists as the art and the science of self-determined learning. So we allow a foundation to hold of craft or whatever we believe it is, and hope that each artist, each community member, each participant springboards from what we class as our foundation and teaches us something incredible and amazing, which is where our digital practice has started. We're currently actually restructuring to support digital practice and many other forms. The idea at the moment for the theatre is, what is our responsibility to artists, to future artists, to people who don't know that they're artists? What's our responsibility to the ecosystem of the region, to digital forms, to screen, to film, television? What's our responsibility to the future leaders, both of the organisation and the cultural sector? So we've just restructured 7 producers, a digital producer, community producer, producer, and whatever that is, and a whole bunch of people, associate directors and admin support that should really allow us to move the theatre into a future that allows multiple art forms to exist in the space at one time. Just remembering that the theatre is exactly that. It is a space. It's a space that holds art. And so though we specialize in live arts, we want to make sure that we're giving space, access, resource and opportunity to artists that are going to diversify into different areas, which again is what has brought us into the digital industry. And we started that with a show called Seaview, which brought 6 writers together. They'd never written for screen before, so we had a showrunner on Sophie Ellaby who had written for screen, and we used my own theatre devising practice and basically said, what would this look like if we were to turn it into a series? How would my theatre devising practice inform the writers, the performers and the actual work eventually, and vice versa? What could I learn from the practitioners that we brought in? And I ended up learning a hell of a lot. I'm actually looking at somebody who I learned a hell of a lot from. And the theatre felt that, again, I'm going to keep going back to responsibility. It was our responsibility to make sure that we gave artists the opportunity to transition where possible, if possible. The devising practice meant that there was nothing that was off the table, in particular for Seaview. That's led us to actually have these wonderful relationships with our associate schools and ELCs, which has given us this really interesting connection opportunity through digital wraparound. We've found an incredible amount of people in the ELCs in particular, formerly known as PRUs, pupil referral units, where a lot of these young people are only expressing themselves through digital form, actually. And so we had no way in to connect with them before now, and now they're creating full bodies of work that wrap around our productions. So, for example, we have a show called The Last Vampire, which is about a vegetarian vampire. It's very much, you know, never judge a book by its cover, a family show, and it's supposed to be about the idea of teaching or seeing each individual as an individual instead of believing that you know something about a community or a collective of people. These young people from the ELCs created a game that then went on the Apple App Store, where they embodied it. They created the whole, through a devising process, they created the whole storyline, the arc, everything about it. And then they also created a really incredible digital immersive space that you could go into, and it taught you the history of Count Dracula and Alucard, and the idea of, again, treating a community in a particular way. And the reason why I mention those two things, in particular, Seaview and The Last Vampire, is that for us, the digital platforms and the ability to create content digitally with our artists meant that individuals had fresh ways of expressing themselves. And indeed, then the theatre became just a resource and the house for which the work was seen and expressed. We've since got a space next door called the Jag. So we have 3 platforms. One is B1 auditorium, which is 850 seats. The other is B2, which is around 270 seats. And then this other space is Jag, which, you know, is transformable. But it's become a space that we're looking at what future forms look like. The question about that space is, what is theatre going to look like in the next 100 years? Which is really, really important to me personally. What role does the digital work play in the live space, and then vice versa? How does what we do live in this space transition to those people who can't get out to the theatre? Actually, one of the things that the pandemic did, which was really interesting, is allow us all to find a way to put live arts in people's homes. But when those people who couldn't come out to the theatre were asking for that, we were fully responding that it was too expensive. There is a beautiful opportunity for access in how we're trying to galvanize and utilize the digital space for creative and live arts. So the JAG looks at that, future forms. It also looks at leadership programs, so bringing people through, allowing them to understand an infrastructure and what it is to run an organization. And then in turn, what we hope is that 10 years on from now, we'll have infrastructure where people are able to come out of their own practices and create their own companies that will push them through. We also created a media academy, which was really about our partnership with Coventry's Refugee and Migrant Centre, in partnership with the Home Office, which again was about using digital art forms and live art to support people who are having to go day by day and express traumatic experiences in order to get whatever it is that they're trying to get out of it. And the JAG has become a home and a space that has kind of harnessed itself for all of these different groups of people, all of these different individuals, using future forms as a way to move it through. And that work has been supported by Paul Hamlin. We had a bunch of partnerships to make it work. I do agree that nothing can happen without partnerships. It's always really, really difficult, but the push for funding is getting really strict and really tight, and unless we're going in collectively, you know, more than likely all the same people are going to be getting all the same money. Sorry for saying it like that, but that's just facts on facts on facts. For us, digital content is a form of expression, and separate to that is a form of unified expression. We're really interested in VR and AR. We've got a lot of people with different learning disabilities and difficulties. And so when we were stepping into VR and allowing individuals to be immersed in their own world, and though, you know, there is something that we may see as a separation, but that is really an invitation for some people, and it's just learning what works for who. A fear of AI, obviously. So interesting again to hear that, learning more and more about it. For our performers, a lot of them are nervous that AI, of course, is gonna take jobs and roles and etc. etc. So I'm on a learning curve for that. Yeah, I will. I promise. I'm on a learning curve with AI. But where we are with the JAG is largely VR, AR. We're going to continue to create for screen. We're going to continue to develop our writers and creatives to be able to transition cross-platform and pivot where necessary. And I think I can leave it there. I just want to reiterate that the role of the theatre is not just to put on plays, but to continue to work with its communities and develop its artists and creatives, and sometimes do both at the same time. You know, sometimes we have incredible artists in the community that don't know that they are creating incredible art, and a lot of times we have culture in parts of the community that we are not respecting for the incredible craft that goes into it. So if we just let go of our understanding of high art for a second, we can really collaborate and make something incredible happen. That is my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. It's such an incredible case study, the work that you're doing at the Belgrade and the JAG. It's fantastic. Well, look, we've got a little bit of time before the break. So what we're going to do is go back to the sofa and a chance to hear a little bit more from Corey and from Ian. Back to you, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you both. That's brilliant. I feel like that was the big picture, and then what it's like at the front line, trying to kind of deal with the pandemic, deal with all the challenges of funding, and also not allow that to limit you in terms of the kind of creative impetus for the work. So amazing to hear about everything going on at the Belgrade. I guess one of the things that I want to ask both of you from different perspectives around this, Ian, a lot of what you were talking about there is, you know, that kind of distribution. How do you distribute something like a VR project? Harmeet and I talked about that. You know, they can be quite limited in the reach that they can have, and they can be limited and limiting to audiences coming to them if there are barriers to engagement. So there is a big responsibility on all of us, producers, art, kind of cultural centres and sector leaders, to understand everything around distribution, which can feel, I think, a bit paralyzing, terrifying. But it is about being a publisher. This is a new way of presenting work. So Ian, do you want to just sort of kick off and say what you think those challenges are and what some of the solutions might be?
Distribution's a nightmare. If we're completely honest, it's really, really difficult without a huge marketing budget, because it's some of the things I was touching upon about having to pay to reach audiences, to get your word out there, your work out there. Really, really, really challenging. You're seeing we're kind of moving into almost the model for immersive work, like a games company, and games companies have huge amounts of resources. They operate almost like the feature film industry, where it's all marketing. You look at the marketing for the recent films that are coming out, it's wall to wall everywhere. Arts has never had the resource to do that. So I think there has to be a rethink. We can't compete on the same, say, like the Steam store, or through Epic Games, or through these other publishers, unless they're on board in some way, or there's an alternative. So I've just produced a VR experience, and the distribution is really challenging. I've seen really well-funded VR experiences for headsets, and they have to have live events and do a live tour, which is a whole other model to digital. So I would like to see things change so that there is an option to distribute digitally at scale, which currently doesn't exist. So it is really, really challenging.
So Corey, with something like Seaview, when you were putting that together, because I can see all the drive and impetus for it as a creative project to challenge yourselves about writing styles, about shooting styles, about where was your conversation around how to distribute it and publish it and present it to audiences?
Yeah, we actually had a partnership with Film Vault at the time, but sadly my little brother and the lead actor in the show died not long after. So we didn't manage to fulfill the criteria for what we were gonna have initially. And then we had various conversations around it, and so the conversations are still ongoing. We've just got a distribution deal with Prime Video, which has been useful. But initially it was supposed to be a collaboration and a partnership with Film Vault that would also support the marketing of the work, being as we know nothing about marketing digitally. And currently, you know, a lot of the work that we're doing is able to be housed at the theatre, actually. So we are using the opportunity to market further for the digital platform. But because a lot of it is like VR still in the space, or the augmented reality is still in the JAG, we haven't had to do the hard work that everybody else is doing, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But it's the other bit, isn't it? That the infrastructure isn't there, you know. So that was my kind of instinct. Is a lot of our commissioned organisations, you know, it's like there's lots of conversation about how you can R&D. Not that it's easy to get funding for R&D and technology, but there's virtually no conversation going on about how does every organisation or individual artist actually overcome the barriers. And as Ian says, the platforms are very specific about what they'll take and where they'll promote it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe as a sector, there is some glorious future where we do all kind of come together and work better to kind of help market these things.
It feels like there's like the open source movement, and so I know certain museums and art galleries are going down the open source route, and they're making their collections available. It's that kind of thinking that can open things up, and suddenly you can see artists be able to, you know, connect with them. And if it's, you know, 3D assets or it's animations or it's heritage work, I think that there is an open source approach that could help with that process. Like a VR experience that I missed at Coventry City of Culture recently, I had to go to Liverpool to see it. And so that seems crazy in a world where it's a digital piece of content, but that's the reality.
Absolutely.
Really valid, actually. So I'm saying that about being in a live space, but the point of it being digital is also access.
You want to be able to have some version. I know we were talking about something recently, which was a VR project, and he said, you know, could you not do the director's cut? You know, it's an immersive experience. If you can experience it in a one-to-one context, you choose your route. But, you know, there's also a valid, I think, thing to say, you know, also have a version which is the director's cut or the author's kind of cut of it, so you can experience it and share something. It also touches on another thing which I think kind of comes into the AI debate as well, which is about rights, though, because you were talking about protecting your creative community, encouraging new voices to come in. And there is a challenge here, isn't there? Because actually we need to see those people paid properly for their contributions. What's your sort of feeling around when you're commissioning a project, which is digital, which potentially is going to have big audiences? What's your approach to that?
Well, yeah, we've been, I say, arguing, pushing to make sure that it's royalties. Of course, as a theatre industry, we don't have the resources for film, but if we're truly talking about equitable opportunity, the idea is that you want it to grow, and with its growth, the support financially for the creative teams and largely lead performers. Unfortunately, it doesn't go across to all performers, but the creative team and the lead performers get strong enough royalties that they're able to see the return on that. We're, of course, you know, part of the unions for that, and we have a separate company for Belgrade, so we get Belgrade Film and Digital, and then the charity and then the limited company. But you know, we're really trying to make sure that we hold the space with the royalties and have that supported by Equity or BEC2 or any of the unions.
It feels like that's another area where, as a sector, we probably need to talk about it and be really honest and make sure that everyone is kind of remunerated and acknowledged to their contribution. And then because this is the point, you as a publisher suddenly taking responsibility, isn't it? And it's a lot of burden. I am so sorry because we are out of time, and I think we want to give everybody a break. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
If people have got questions, please put them in. There'll be a panel after the break, so we can always take additional questions there. But I think we're going to take a break now and be back at 15:15. Thank you all very much.